Kia ora! Welcome to Shared Lunch, brought to you by Sharesies with BusinessDesk. Sharesies is a wealth development platform whose purpose is to create financial empowerment for everyone. My name is Frances Cook. I'm the investments editor for BusinessDesk. Now we have a special offer for Sharesies investors from BusinessDesk. If you use the promo code SharedLunch100, that's all one word, SharedLunch100, you'll get $100 off an annual subscription to BusinessDesk, which is usually $249, including GST. Now, the offer only applies to new BusinessDesk subscribers, can only be used once per subscriber, and can't be used with any other discounts. Now, before we get started, here's some important information.
Investing involves risk. You might lose the money you start with. We recommend talking to a licensed financial advisor. We also recommend reading product disclosure documents before deciding to invest. Everything you're about to see and hear is current at the time of recording.
Now, also just a quick reminder, if you have any questions for our guests today, you can submit them through the Ask a Question button down below. Don't leave questions in the discussion area. They are likely to get missed. I don't want to miss them. You guys always have great questions. Please do be kind and respectful towards our guest and your fellow viewers. Otherwise, we will unfortunately have to take steps to remove you from the webinar. Today, we're joined by Mark Lucas. He is the CEO of Cannasouth Limited. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. Now, you've been involved in this space in a way since 1996. You were the managing director of Hemp Tech New Zealand, which was a textile company. That was 1996 to 2018. So a little overlap there with the founding of Cannasouth in 2017. What attracts you to this area?
Yeah, it's interesting. It certainly has been a bit of a history with industrial hemp, back in the mid-90s. So I've always been passionate about natural products. So that led us to sort of setting up that original business. The co-founder of Cannasouth and I also had some of the first licenses to cultivate industrial hemp here in New Zealand back in 2002. So at that time, it was really a fibre story. We were building a company that was producing natural textiles for soft furnishings. And we were doing research here with the local university, looking at using hemp as composite materials to try and replace fiberglass. So that was our sort of journey for a long time. And over that, I think it was around 2015, 2016, we started seeing the emergence of CBD in particular overseas and started to realize the true medicinal potential of cannabis. And obviously, I think most people were aware of medicinal cannabis and that people were using it to sort of alleviate some side effects from chemotherapy and things like that. But when we started to see CBD and some of the effects that was happening, it really sort of showed that, hey, there's more to this than possibly that we had thought. And so we started to investigate, started to do a bit of work in the space, started to look at how we could get licenses. There was no regulatory environment to support it back then, and literally just put one foot after the other on the way through to find ourselves here today.
Well, of course, you mentioned there, you've got a lot of firsts, and Cannasouth was New Zealand's first medicinal cannabis company to list on the NZX back in 2019. And you mentioned those, medicinal cannabis research licenses, both cultivation and extraction of cannabinoids. To me, it does seem strange that in a country with both a strong agricultural sector and we've got a pretty strong technology sector too, that it would take so long for these things to be happening. Why do you think we don't have more companies like yours?
Look, I think cannabis is it's a very political subject. There's a lot of dogma and stigma around cannabis. And so I think medicinal cannabis is being led by the public. The public have sort of dragged the politicians along on the way, sort of forced their hands, really. It's unusual to find a medicine or a class of therapeutics that is actually pushed by the people. So people have been using medicinal cannabis for a long time, accessing it from the black market. So really what we saw is a real push. I think before Labor got in, this first term, when they got in, they were being pushed to sort of really move this subject along. And so since then, it has developed. We've got regulations now. The regulations aren't perfect, but they are functional, and there are companies that are developing. But the reality is, for New Zealand, we are regulating these products as pharmaceutical products, and so the regulatory environment is strict, and it does take a lot of time to sort of work through these regulations and build a company that can meet the standards. And we're not unique there as well. Key markets like Germany, also have these types of quality standards. So the reality is that, even though it's difficult, it does set us up for being able to supply, obviously, New Zealand patients, but also, international patients as well.
Now, as a medicinal cannabis company, you are, of course, not just growing, you're creating products. So what sort of products do you have? How are they different from other medicinal cannabis products on the market?
So it's a great question. One of the things about medicinal cannabis in New Zealand is that they fall under a classification called Section 29 of the Medicines Act, which basically means that they're unapproved. So they're not approved to treat any particular condition. So the medicinal cannabis scheme really regulates the quality, that says the quality is what it is, and prescribers are then left to decide which conditions they may or may not use them to treat patients. So for companies that are producing products, including Cannasouth, we're not able to promote them in any way. So I can't talk specifically about any products that we may or may not be developing because of those restrictions, but I can sort of talk generally about medicinal cannabis and the types of products that are available.
That's really interesting that you can't talk about your products. I mean, does that make it difficult to operate?
Yes and no. Prescribers can approach manufacturers to seek out this information, at which point we are allowed to tell them about our products. The Medicinal Cannabis Agency does on their website list the products that have been verified as meeting the New Zealand minimum quality standards. So prescribers can go there and find those products and then sort of contact the manufacturers directly to get more information.
Okay, interesting. Now, walk me through medicinal cannabis versus recreational cannabis. How are those two worlds different? And also, is there a difference in terms of product and cultivation? How deep do the differences go?
Yeah, look, I think recreational cannabis is about inducing a high. Medicinal cannabis is about reducing clinical conditions. So, pain, anxiety are a couple of key areas where medicinal cannabis use is widespread. Seizure reduction as well. I think most medicinal cannabis users are not looking to actually get a high from the product. And in most cases, it's actually an unwanted side effect. People want to get about their lives. They want to continue to enjoy their lives without being inebriated, if you like. So I think those are the two key differences between, recreational and medicinal cannabis. So for a company like Cannasouth, it's about developing therapeutics that produce the desired therapeutic outcomes, but reduce the narcotic effect so that you're, able to enable patients to go about their day without having to worry about, as I say, being under the influence of THC.
Okay, now I don't want to delay this any longer because I know a lot of the people listening to this webinar will want to know all about this. Let's jump into the news that is fresh out this morning, just a couple of hours old. Cannasouth has announced its subsidiary, Cannasouth Bioscience, signed a 3-year supplier agreement with a German company. Now that's Wico Pharma. Tell me if I'm pronouncing that right.
That's
and also
correct.
tell me more about the deal.
Yeah, well, essentially, we've built a company here that's able to produce, pharmaceutical quality medicinal cannabis products for New Zealand patients, but also, the international market. We have to make sure as a business that we've got sufficient revenue to actually, sustain the business. We've got to balance, also producing a return for our shareholders as well. So we need to leverage off export opportunities to basically be able to operate at the scale that we need to, which ultimately will help reduce, prices for patients here in New Zealand for products that we will produce. So we've been on a worldwide search really for looking for a key partner that shares the right values and ways of working, but also has access to those key European markets, which operate again with those similar quality standards to what we're producing. So, through that process, we've obviously commissioned our cultivation facility. It's been designed to be able to produce, that pharmaceutical quality product, that real premium quality product. So we needed to find a partner that was able to actually, take that material and get it into those key markets. And we believe we've done that with this partnership.
Now, it's been reported that the total value of the agreement during years 2 and 3 is somewhere between the 12 million to 15 million New Zealand dollars. So, what's the significance of this agreement to your business?
Yeah, so that's an indication, really. The deal does work with market pricing. Market pricing will change, so it's giving a bit of an indication on current market pricing, and based on the type of volumes that we're looking at producing for them, a range that because it does also depend on the product type, bulk pack versus finished patient packs and quality standards and what have you. But it gives you a good indication of the potential of that deal, and then that does take us a long way to being where we need to be. This is just the first phase of our cultivation facility as well. So we've deliberately designed that facility to be scalable in the future, so that as market demand increases, we can look at adding additional, sealed greenhouses on the front. So that facility is world class, and it's one of the reasons that this particular partner has chosen to work with us, because they've looked at the quality of the facility, the quality of the people, and our knowledge, and decided that we're a good fit for them as well.
Is it a sign of more deals to come? Are you talking to other people or even possibly more deals with this company?
Look, I mean, obviously, you're always looking to, to sign more deals. I mean, we have to look at what our capacity is as well. We want to make sure that we've got sufficient material that's set aside for the New Zealand market as well. So, we'll continue to work and look at different markets, but this is a sort of a key partnership for us that will, ultimately utilize a lot of the capacity that we're producing out of the current phase of our facility.
Yeah, what is the balance for you? I mean, ideally, it's really one of those things. You're not going to say no to business, are you? But the balance that you're pursuing, what are you hoping for in terms of New Zealand market versus international? Is there a percentage split that's an ideal for you?
I wouldn't say it's necessarily about what's ideal per se. The New Zealand market, let's face it, we only have, circa 5 million people here. So it's only ever going to be a certain size. So again, Cannasouth has been built to, the reason we're called Cannasouth actually is because we're not based in the south of New Zealand, but we're based in the south of the planet. So that sort of says a little bit about what we're trying to do. We've got global ambitions, but we are very conscious about making sure that we, look after New Zealand patients, and many of our shareholders will be patients as well. So it's just getting that balance right, really, and making sure that we do look after our home market as well.
Yeah, and you say in the announcement that exporting medicinal cannabis flower has always been part of Cannasouth's strategy. Um, so what do those plans look like? What sort of markets does that mean that you focus on, and what are your ideal customers? Where are they?
Yeah, well, again, I think Europe is a key market. So really, we're looking at the markets that require that highest quality standard. It's GMP is a pharmaceutical standard that is often referred to. So, for us, we've built our facility, our quality management system, everything around being able to meet those very high standards. So those are the key markets that we're looking for. So different markets are developing, quickly around the world, and there is always nuances in each of these markets in regards to the regulatory, framework that they operate in. So it's really a case-by-case basis, looking at what regulatory environment suits what we're doing. the size of that market, the ability to access that market. The reality is for us is we're probably operating in one of the most regulated spaces that there actually is. These are not just pharmaceuticals, they're controlled drugs, and even controlled drugs, this is cannabis. And so there's many countries around the world that cannabis is still completely illegal, including medicinal cannabis. So the logistics, even freighting these types of products around the world can be a challenge. Insurance, there's a range of challenges for companies like Cannasouth that, we have to navigate. And so it requires, quite a lot of knowledge and a sort of a big team to be able to sort of, to do it all.
Well, yes, it does strike me, considering that you cultivate as well as manufacture, as in grow product before refining into medicinal products. Does that ever cause a security issue in terms of people hoping to get hold of your products for the black market?
Yeah, look, security is a big part of the medicinal cannabis scheme. So, whenever you get a license in this space, the first thing you're really demonstrating is that you've got the security protocols and procedures and in place to be able to secure what you're doing. So it's a very big part of the scheme. So yeah, it's fair to say there's a lot of security around what we do. So yeah, it's definitely a big part of the scheme.
Well, yeah, because I mean, is it right that where you cultivate is that plant's address still a secret?
Yeah, it is. We certainly don't publish the address of that particular facility. Again, it's got high security. There's a lot of, let's face it, in many industries, there are warehouses, full of valuable, assets and things that are desirable, for the black market, if you like, or to be stolen. So our security is definitely very, very high, and it's something that we focus on. So, but yeah, we don't publish where that facility is located.
Yeah, and we've talked a bit about the differences between medicinal versus recreational, but of course, I think it has to be talked about in terms of the 2020 cannabis referendum in New Zealand, which was focused on whether or not to legalize recreational cannabis. But considering that that answer was no, did it impact your business? Because it did, of course, unfortunately mean that the share price took quite a tumble.
Yeah, look, I think at the end of the day, Cannasouth has always been a medicinal cannabis company, and so we've always been very clear about that. Um, you know, I- yes, absolutely, there was potentially people that were buying Cannasouth shares because they thought that a positive outcome on the referendum, in other words, legalizing recreational cannabis, was going to have a positive impact for a company like Cannasouth. We obviously can't control that type of investing, but we were very clear that we are a medicinal cannabis company. And so, the reality is that it didn't change anything for us. We were continuing, and we continue to build the same things that we were building before the referendum, but it certainly created a lot of confusion and a lot of noise out there, if you like, which maybe wasn't helpful. But as I say, it didn't change anything on a day-to-day basis for us.
Do you ever run up against legislation issues or even attitudes that cause problems for your business because of those associations with the recreational side of things?
From an attitudes point of view, I'd have to say no. The reality is that there is so much support out there for medicinal cannabis. It's, a survey, I think a couple of years ago, it put it something like 90% of people support medicinal cannabis. So it's a really widespread support. Just about everybody that I speak to, if I mention who I am and what we're doing, you'll hear the stories of my auntie is using medicinal cannabis, or I've used it. And, often a lot of these people are still accessing it from the black market, unfortunately. But it's so widespread, the sort of, desire for medicinal cannabis to be accessible and for people to be able to use it. So from that side of it, absolutely very, little resistance. We do have good engagement with the regulators here. The medicinal cannabis scheme was pushed out, in regulatory timeframes in a very fast fashion because there was so much public desire to see these products made available. Now, of course, like most things, if you do it particularly fast, especially complex regulations that we have with the medicinal cannabis scheme, you're not always going to get it exactly right. So it's fair to say there are nuances within the regulations, and and this is a very hot topic for a lot of people, because a lot of people, of course, want much more availability to, for medicinal cannabis products. But as a business, operating under standards that are similar to most sort of key markets that we deal with, the regulations are, mostly in line. But there are definitely nuances there that require some tweaks to, avoid unnecessary costs for companies like us, which ultimately unnecessary costs, and especially time delays as well, it does affect the cost of the products, which is what, reduces accessibility for patients as well.
Yeah. Let's talk about some of the things that came out of your AGM earlier this year, because there was some interesting stuff came out of that. You talked a bit at that time about, other medicinal cannabis companies producing generic products, and that your goal was to find more therapeutic options, have more interesting niche products. So where do you see opportunities for the industry? And considering the legal restraints you're under, how much can you tell us about more products and therapeutic options that you see as being possible options for your company?
Yeah, so I can just talk again conceptually or at a high level, as opposed to any individual products. But at the moment, most medicinal cannabis that's on the market are very simple formulations. Essentially what they are is a mix of THC and CBD as active ingredients mixed with MCT oil, which is essentially coconut oil. Put in a little bottle. It's a dripper that goes, under the tongue. Very primitive formulations, and so quite often quite generic formulations. The bioavailability of these preparations is poor as well. So the reality is that patients are taking more than they need just to get a sufficient quantity absorbed into the system. So there's a huge amount of development in that space to make the make products, more bioavailable, more easy to use. So I think we need, and any company operating in the space needs to get away from these generic, type products and get into more, advanced products, next generation products. And it's something that we've always been focused on. So, the flower that we produce at the moment is, it's a big part of our business, but it's a stepping stone really. What we're really interested in is developing these next generation of therapeutics that, unlock a range, we believe will unlock a range of new treatment options, in the coming years. Obviously we're not alone in the space. There's a lot of companies that are out there trying to do the same thing. But having said that, we're at the start of a very long journey with the development of cannabinoid therapeutics. And so, there'll be lots of, new innovations to come over the coming years.
Interesting. And another thing mentioned at the AGM, you told shareholders you couldn't rule out a capital raise this year. So talk to me more about that. Is it still a possibility, and why not?
Yeah, I mean, operating a business like this is complex. It requires a lot of upfront investment, and we've been really fortunate to have the support of shareholders, on the way through as we've built our stake in the business. I think we've definitely achieved some great milestones, in recent months, and they're on the back of essentially what has been a foundation building phase. If you don't build really strong foundations in a sector like this, you simply won't be able to produce, compliant products or, thread the regulatory needle, so to speak. So yeah, we did highlight that a capital raise, there is the potential for a capital raise. We highlighted that in our annual report. So at this point in time, the board hasn't fixed a view on that, but it's something that certainly, could happen in the near future or this year.
Right. I mean, because it is, of course, and you've been fairly open about this, you've been posting losses until now, and you have said that you hope to post a profit in the 2023 year. So tell me more about what's happening on that front and the things that you would need to happen to get into the black.
Yeah, well, essentially, I mean, some of the milestones that we've been achieving really are the indications of moving from that foundation phase to commercialization. So there's a lot of work that gets to that point where you've actually, able to start producing products in this pharmaceutical space. So that's obviously the key for us, is just moving from establishment and foundation building to actually getting, products exported and products on the market here in New Zealand. So, we're moving through that phase now. So, that's a key to moving towards profitability for sure.
Yeah, and the WeCo deal, will that be part of what helps you get there?
Oh, naturally, absolutely. Once we can start delivering on an agreement like that, then absolutely that type of revenue will move us well on the road towards profitability.
It's really interesting stuff. I will just give a quick reminder to our watchers here today. Some great questions coming through already, heaps. The other thing I would say is if you still have a burning question, chuck that in to the Ask a Question section, but also upvote those questions that you are interested in. Then I know which ones to prioritize because often it ends up that I can't get through all of them. So let's make sure that I ask the ones that you guys are most burning to hear answered. But before we get to that, last one from me. What are you expecting over the next 12 months? Gaze into your crystal ball for me and find one highlight, one low light for me.
Oh, a highlight and a low light. I mean, again, obviously, getting our first flower exports out the door will be, a highlight for us. There's still work that we have to do in that space. It's a complex area. As I say, those regulatory barriers are real, but we've got the team and the processes to do it. Potential low light. I mean, it's difficult to say. You can't sort of predict what a low light might be. I guess there's always the potential for regulatory delays and things like that. But, we have good engagement with the regulators. They are, our regulators here in New Zealand, to their credit, are trying to enable the industry rather than disable it, which is a key point. So, look, in an industry like this, we hit barriers every single day. And one of the things I'm most proud of is the resilience that we have within our team and the passion that we have within our team to actually get the job done. And because they all know that at the other end of it are patients that are desperately waiting for products. And so, I often joke around here. It's just you just have to roll the punches because we're trailblazing. This is a new industry, and again we're testing each regulation head on. In many cases for the first time. So it's exciting.
Yeah, it is. There's a lot happening in this space, and especially considering that you've just announced a bunch more today. So let's jump into audience questions. We have to start with this from Bill. It has the most upvotes. Will your products be prescription based or just off the shelf?
Okay, that's a really great question, and I think this is an area where there's a huge amount of confusion. All medicinal cannabis products in New Zealand, whether we like it or not, are prescription only. That includes CBD products as well. So, CBD in some markets overseas is regulated as more of a food supplement. In some markets, there's very little regulation at all. And so New Zealand has landed on CBD as a prescription-only medicine. So all medicinal cannabis products in New Zealand are by prescription only.
I'm not sure how much of this question you can answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway and leave it up to you on how much you can answer. This from David. Hi, Mark. I realize you'll be asked this by many, but how much of the cost to consumers for the CBD products currently on the market is government tax? And which product is best for osteoarthritis pain? I don't know if you can answer that last bit.
I can't answer the last bit. In regards to tax, there is no tax on these products, other than GST and obviously any income tax that companies have to pay as a normal operating business. But there's no specific tax on these, and I can't sort of comment on that therapeutic question.
Have a chat to your doctor, I think, David. I think that's always the best. This from Gregory. What is the max capacity of the manufacturing plant? How far are they from the max production capacity at present?
So the cultivation facility, which is operational at the moment, we've indicated it has a production capacity of around 1,500 to 1,800 kilos of flower per annum. That depends on the genetic and the type, that we're growing out there. So that's the production capacity of that facility. Our manufacturing facility, where we will manufacture finished products, is not operational yet. So we can't comment on what the end output of that facility would be.
Interesting. When will that be operational?
We're working on that at the moment. As a business, we've sort of needed to prioritize our efforts into, where we can generate revenue to support the business the earliest possible. And so this flower opportunity is a big opportunity. It continues to grow globally, the demand for flower. So one of the reasons, last year after our capital raise, we consolidated the group. And one of the reasons we did that, so that as a business, we've got the ability to focus our resources, where the biggest demand is at any one time. Having said that, we're still committed to producing, finished products as well. But we just have to pick our battles at this point in time.
Yeah, I mean, with you still considering things like the capital raise, if that was to go ahead, do you know where you would be targeting those resources? Which would be the next biggest priority for you?
If and when we consider a capital raise, we'd obviously highlight all of that information at that time.
Ooh, mysterious. Okay, this from Rosalind. Will you be considering amalgamation with other growers in New Zealand?
Look, I think as a business, we always need to be thinking about whether there are opportunities to, merger and acquisition opportunities. I think the industry will consolidate over time. At this point in time, it's not something that we've got on our radar, but it's certainly something that we're always open to, looking at areas where, the industry can consolidate to, basically be more efficient ultimately.
Mm. This sort of goes back to your previous role a bit, I guess, and your previous textile background. Does Cannasouth work with hemp? If so, are you working on plant-based protein products or can cannabis plant waste be used? That's from Angela.
That's another really good question. Look, we love hemp products. Well, I do personally. The way the medicinal cannabis scheme is designed is that hemp is specifically excluded from the scheme. You can grow hemp varieties for, say, CBD production, but they need to then be licensed under a medicinal cannabis licensing regime. So it sort of does, and again, there's a lot of contention and I guess a lot of those in the hemp industry that wish that it wasn't this way. But the fact is, it is this way. We don't design the regulations. We just have to work, within them. So for us, we're not dealing with hemp products. We don't have any involvement at the moment in that area. It's not to say we wouldn't in the future, but at the moment, we have to focus on what we're doing and make sure we deliver on what is a highly complex, product line with medicinal cannabis products.
This is a fairly technical question from John. Hi, Mark. Considering you've just harvested your first crops, how is Cannasouth planning to scale up crop production capacity for meeting needs? Will you consider things like using lighting technology to maximize crop outputs?
Another great question. So yeah, one of the things with our facility is essentially it's designed to operate like an indoor facility, but we harness the power of the sun. So what that means is in an indoor facility, you use, high intensity lighting, you control all the temperature and humidity, and it's how you produce that sort of real pharmaceutical quality material. We weren't happy with just going with the standard indoor model, and so we created a sort of a hybrid which utilizes the power of the sun as the primary light source, but we also supplement with high intensity LED lighting as well to ensure that lighting levels don't drop below optimum levels. So we're already incorporating that type of technology in our current facility. So in regards to scaling the facility, as I mentioned before, we designed the processing parts of the facility, the vegetative areas within the facility, and also the post-harvest, the GMP pharmaceutical quality post-harvest areas to be able to support, more greenhouses in the future. But essentially, we didn't want to go too big too soon. We wanted to make sure we met the market. So, demand will dictate, the timing of that scale up, basically.
Now, I love how this question starts. This is very much asking on behalf of a friend. Raylene says, family member has a question. Do you know why it's hard to get the CBD oil that has no THC in it? They commented the cost is not affordable for majority of people.
So the question was, there are, CBD oil products available that don't contain THC under the scheme. And again, I can't comment on who or why or, what company produces them, but, they do exist. In regards to pricing, unfortunately, these products aren't subsidized in any way. And so to manufacture them does come at a cost, to produce them to a pharmaceutical quality consistently every time. So I think obviously most patients in New Zealand are used to pharmac subsidized medicines and paying just a prescription fee when they go and have those filled. Unfortunately, with these products, until there are clinical trials completed and the potential for a fully approved product with funding from Pharmac, the patients do bear the cost out of their own pocket. And it is, it's a real challenge for many people, and we understand that. And, that's why I think for us, we need to operate at a reasonable scale. It's through scale that you can basically bring the unit prices down. And that's why, again, going back to that export question, that's why export is the key way for us to get to that point.
Have you had any indications that the government would consider subsidizing these products, or is it a hard no on that front?
Yeah, I guess the answer would be, funding generally comes on the back of strong clinical data, of evidence. There's a lot of clinical trials going on around the world using, cannabinoids in therapeutics. And so we're going to start to see that data coming through, in the coming years. So look, I'd be fairly confident to say funding will come. Is it going to come in the short term? Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, this is a great question from Caitlin. What impact did the recent free trade agreement with the European Union have on the recent deal with Germany? Of course, the timing there is extremely similar. So did it have an impact?
No direct impact on a deal like this.
Interesting. Was it included in that? I should know this off the top of my head, but I don't. Was there any of the agreement in that free trade agreement? Was that impacting on your business at all?
No, not for us. No, not with the type of products that we produce, fortunately. Well, yeah, just not. No, it doesn't affect us.
Interesting. I mean, being based in New Zealand, is it tricky? You said that there are regulations for things like shipping, that can be tricky, and we are at the bottom of the world. There is a lot of shipping involved.
Mm.
How does that go? Is it tricky being based here? Is that ever a drawback?
Yeah, look, it's always the problem being in New Zealand is the tyranny of distance. I think, any company out there that's exporting products from New Zealand, needs to find their niche to make, the value proposition right for the potential customer. So I think with us, again, we have to focus, or we've chosen to focus on the highest quality, and New Zealand does have a reputation for quality and innovation. And so, many customers will be looking for, especially the larger customers, are often looking for a mix of suppliers. They might be looking for suppliers from low-cost countries, and then also looking to make sure that they have a mix of sort of more premium, suppliers in there as well. The key for us is developing genetics. And so again, it's getting away from, the generic type products, or really focusing in on unique genetics. And so that's something that we've focused on. But yeah, distance is always a challenge for companies from New Zealand. So as I say, for us, it's a focus on that, on quality, consistency and reliability.
And particularly, I mean, getting into the German market, they have made it very clear that they have quite high quality standards. You mentioned there about issues with genetics and developing that. I mean, how long does that take when you are cultivating these strains and you are working on this? How far forward do you have to plan?
It takes a while, actually, because you have to bring a genetic in. You have to basically run it through your, a stage gating process to look at the cannabinoid and terpene profiles. You need to then look at its suitability within your cultivation environment. You have to produce material. If that flower was going to be a finished product, you need to put it into patient packs. You need to start producing stability data that shows the shelf life of that in the packaging. So there is a lot involved in that. So you do have to be looking a fair way ahead. And that was another key component of this deal that we've done with Weco is, they have a genetics development program going in Denmark. And so we're looking to piggyback off that to sort of work with some of the genetics they're developing, while in the meantime, we're also working to, add to our own stable of genetics down here as well. So we think, hopefully that'll be a good mix between the two companies.
Fascinating stuff. All right, well, that's pretty much everyone's questions answered. I mean, all the questions that I think we can answer given the subject matter. So thank you for tuning in, everyone, and a big thank you to Mark for joining us. Really appreciate your time and your insights. Now, next week on Shared Lunch, we'll be taking the temperature of the travel and aviation industries. Independent economist Benji Patterson will be our guide through what is a fairly challenging time for those sectors. A link to register for that discussion is in the chat right now. Tune in, it's going to be a good one. But until then, enjoy the rest of your week. Do stay safe.